Of course you're going to be exhausted. That's a lot of extra effort. My gosh, it's like taking a machete to the jungle. We can't just go down the well-trodden paths, right, of our neuro pathways. Things are offline. Entire categories and sections of our brain might feel offline. But we have to give ourselves permission to be where we are in the process. So this framework is here to help you identify where you are in your journey. Hi there, Irene from This Mindful Muse here, and today I want to have a conversation about grief. The grieving process. Now, whether you have grieved in the past, or perhaps you are part of a support system for someone who is moving through the grieving process, perhaps you're looking in the future and assuming that you will be moving through grief at another point in time, or maybe you are moving through it in this moment. I want you to know that you're not alone. I want you to know that it's very natural and appropriate to feel really intense and polarizing feelings when we're moving through grief. It takes a toll. It takes a toll on the mind, the body, and the spirit. So let's talk a little bit about a few things that we know in the common zeitgeist conversation surrounding the process of grief, and then a few other takeaways that I hope will be helpful for you on your journey, whether you are, again, moving through grief in this moment, supporting someone, thinking that you will be moving through it in the future, or something else. Now, a really common conversation that I think is easy to approach is that very popular 5 stages of grief theory via Elisabeth Kubler-Ross. This book was released on death and dying in 1969, and it kind of really helped to set a standard. It really helped to set an understanding of what might be included in the grief process. Now, since then, we've had lots of psychiatrists and psychoanalysts and trauma specialists come forward and say that there are actually other models for approaching grief. And they often start with that 5-step, and then they kind of tease things out, or, shift something around. So let's go ahead and acquaint ourselves with this kind of common conversation. And I want to make sure we preface this by saying that Elisabeth Kubler-Ross has been really very clear in saying that there is no particular order to grieving. Despite the fact that these are numbered, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that is an approach for us to simply dive into one section at a time, but it is in no means suggesting that you are supposed to start at 1 and end at 5, right? Many people may move in that way, but you might start at 3, move to 1, move to 4, then 2, then 5. You can move around, and you will likely be recycling through many of these sections, sensations, categories while you are processing grief. When I think of personal development and the forward and backward momentum, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, a really helpful visualization for me when I'm feeling like I'm moving through the spiral of life, and I think about this for grief as well, is that if we were to roughly look at a trajectory, right, we might see an upward momentum movement. However, we get these low dips, and it can often feel like we're making progress and we're failing. We're making progress and then we're failing. We're making progress and then we're failing. A helpful alternative viewpoint for me is the idea that we're spiraling upward. And so we make this forward momentum. Now we're spiraling down, but we're still moving up. Spiraling down, moving up. Spiraling down, moving up. It's almost this idea that the movement down is in balance to what will then be further movement up, right? And that we know that even in those moments of feeling down, that there can still be forward, upward progression. So I think it's really important that if you are projecting for yourself some prescribed idea of what grieving is supposed to look like, I really want to offer you this invitation to pause and to question why you might be doing that. It can be helpful for us to have an idea of what expectations are out there, or if we're doing it right. I'm sorry to tell you there is no right way to grieve. This is what makes it so tricky and why it can be hard to move through the process, or why you might feel alone, which is why it's really helpful to get support in one way, shape, fashion or another. So if we were thinking about that spiraling up, right? And knowing that everyone moves through the grieving process in their own way, and that you might move through different, parts of the grieving process, and then you might recycle back, right? Years in the future, you might suddenly find yourself back in a particular, now it might be less intense, but in a particular category of the grieving process. Because we continue to experience the loss. It is not as if now that that thing is gone, that it is going to be back. And that hurts. It's okay for it to hurt. But we have to give ourselves permission to be where we are in the process. So this framework is here to help you identify where you are in your journey. Remind yourself that other psychoanalysts and specialists have added to this list. And so if you don't feel like these resonate with you and for you, it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. The goal is to give yourself permission, and this is what's really hard. This is something that I can say easily, but it can in practice be difficult, right? To feel the feelings. If you've never heard the phrase, you have to feel it to heal it, I use it a lot because I find it really helpful. Gosh, do I love to intellectualize and understand and think through my feelings, my trauma, understand why I'm having particular sensations or things are coming up, and it helps me process to understand why. So we'll have some of those conversations today. However, understanding and knowing it is so different from practicing and feeling it. You have to feel it to heal it. And, I think about the difference between knowing the rules of a game and playing a game. I can know the rules of a game. I can understand why this or that person is in this or that position and what point system is attached to when this or that thing occurs, right? What kind of instrument we're using, what kind of field we're on, what movement means or doesn't mean. I could know all that. It's a very different experience to be on the field, to be running, to be passing, to be catching, right? Or whatever this game might include, kicking, blocking, what have you, right? The same thing goes for knowing a recipe. It might look really simple on a piece of paper. Have this, and that. Mix it together, put it in at this temperature, or put it on at this temp, or for this long, right? But then doing the thing is very different. It's different to have to collect each of those items, to interact with them physically, to have to slice something in a particular way, or to need to grate something, to need to chop or mix, blend, whip, crack something. And then to need to wait, the waiting process, the checking on something and feeling the texture of it and getting that feedback and knowing that you need more of this or less of that, and tasting it, deciding, is this what I want or do I want to go off recipe? So all of this is simply an example to say that if you catch yourself doing what I catch myself often doing, which I'm still working to unlearn and still learning to give myself opportunities to practice this. Grieving is the same. Practicing grieving is the feeling it so that you can feel it to heal it. It's a part of the process. So knowing it here is helpful, it's useful, it helps us to understand where we are, it helps us to give ourselves permission to feel sometimes. Not that we need that permission, but sometimes we feel like we need that permission. And so if you need to give yourself a permission slip, here it is. Here it is. This is your permission slip to feel the feelings. We may be resistant to feeling the feelings. We may be afraid that we will be swallowed whole by the sea of grief. swallowed by raging seas, right? By waves. And that's a little bit of what grief can feel like. It can come in waves. And when we're resisting either going under the wave or riding the wave, when we're trying to move against the wave, right? Boy, does that tire us out real quick. Real quick. It's a lot. So my suggestion would be finding ways that work for you, for who you are as a person, giving yourself permission, if you need it, in windows of time that stretch however long or brief, right? However short or expanded they need to be, to feel the feelings. To see the wave coming and to say, I'm either going to ride with this wave and let it take me where it takes me, knowing that I'll end up on shore at some point. Or to say, I see this wave coming and instead of fighting it, I'm going to dive right into it, right? Come up on the other side. I hope that those visual images, I hope that those help. So let's think a little bit about the 5 stages of grief that were popularized by Kubler-Ross. I've got here them written down, and I'm going to kind of go through them, and then I would love for us to also just kind of look at some of these other ideas. And I want to kind of offer and suggest some thoughts. There are these general words that you may not completely resonate with, but I invite you to find something surrounding the word. If you were to visit a thesaurus and type this word in, there might be an associated word that you do connect with. Let's see if we can find our way into giving ourselves permission to grieve. Let's look at those 5 stages of grief. The first stage of grief, and again, when I say first, I mean that I'm simply I'm assigning them numbers so that they are categorized in a particular way. It doesn't mean that you have to do this first, then second. It means that we're going to discuss it first, if that makes sense, right? You can come into this feeling at any time. Often this may be one of the first feelings for many, but it doesn't have to be the first one for you. You might go to somewhere else first. You might also overlap, like straddle more than one category at a time. And remember, we might be recycling through these, so we may revisit them at other times. The first one, meaning the first category we will be discussing, is denial. I like to add on there, and a lot of trauma specialists like to add the word shock. Shock. It's a shock to the system. And it's interesting because the end of something, sometimes even if we know that it's coming for a while, like for example, someone has been ill for a while, and we know that at some point they will no longer be with us, but there's still something like a shock to the system of realizing that moment has come and attempting to navigate, what do I do? So I like to connect shock with denial, and many trauma specialists do, because it's the idea of, the denial almost comes from the idea of, that can't be true. There's a part of us that might be resisting accepting that this has occurred. It's almost as if we've slipped into an alternate timeline. Maybe we saw this coming and it still feels not right or unfamiliar, or gosh, I wouldn't have chosen this, right? I don't want this to be true. So those feelings of denial, for some folks, it's really helpful to see the deceased, or to write themselves a letter of, I now release this, to see it on a calendar, here is the end date, and yet still when they get there, it still feels unreal because it's uncomfortable, but it also just means that our system is accustomed to existing in this other place where this person is within reach, or this relationship is within reach, or is our normal. The denial means that we're being confronted with the idea that we will no longer live in what was normal, what we had adjusted to, our expectations, right? Now that means that we're being invited to build a new normal. We had this old, this previous adaptation that we had made, this comfort that we had built, or this expectation. Suddenly now something has shifted and changed. We no longer have access to that before, and there is the time after, and there is an adjustment period. So the shock and denial is often a coping mechanism. Our brain, our nervous system might be trying to give us a window of time before we're dropped into the other more intense feelings. Denial also can come attached with it as numbness, feeling numb, unable to process, this can't be real, or I don't want this to be real, or this just feels so unnatural. I'm not accustomed to this, right? So I think attaching numbness is important here, because sometimes people feel like they're being robotic, or they're shocked that they're numb because they're seeing other people express their grief very outwardly or in a particular way, and they might feel like they're not grieving correctly. I just want you to know that it's a very natural, appropriate response to feel numb. I can relate to feeling numb with a few losses that I've experienced, especially in the early stages. I didn't know how to feel, and I didn't feel ready yet to dive into the depth of the sea of my emotions. And so numbness was almost like my little floaty. It's like my safety boat, my little safety float. And it didn't mean that I wasn't gonna need to take a dip at some point and feel the emotion. And sometimes the numbness would punctuate that riding of the wave, right? But just know that if you are feeling feelings of numbness, a part of it is likely your nervous system, your inner child / subconscious mind looking to protect your conscious mind and your subtle body by offering this option of let's not feel anything for a moment while I get things prepared for us to fall into the abyss, right? So if you're feeling numb, take a moment to say, if you feel comfortable, thank you, nervous system, for allowing me to feel numb. I'm now ready to start dipping my toe into the emotion, if you feel ready, right? Not everyone feels ready to feel those emotions just yet. What's interesting about numbness as well is it again, it's that connector. It's kind of like connective tissue between things. So again, you might come in and out of numbness. It's a very natural and appropriate response to grieving. So let's look at, we talked about shock, denial, numbness. Now, what's important about all of these sections of grieving, categories of grieving, moments, we're intended to temporarily reside there. We're not moving in full time. This is a weekend at an Airbnb, right? Or a month at an Airbnb. Or perhaps we're in and out of it, but we're not moving in full time. This is not where we're living full time. And none of these are intended to be where we reside full time. Now, you might spend a short period of time in one category and a longer stay in another. A week or two here, a few months here, right? And then we might cycle back through. But it's really important to know that these are intended to be temporary. Those windows of time look different for everyone. You might feel numb for a day and then drop into it. You might feel numb for weeks until you have created enough safety in your nervous system for your subconscious mind to say, okay, let's pull up the grief. It's like pulling water from a well. Like, we're going to have to let's pull it up so we can drink it. Right? Actually, really important point here while I'm saying this. We don't want to drown in the grief, right? Taking a sip at a time is important, but we want to make sure that we're allowing ourselves to ride the waves, to take the sips, to have our, dip our toe, whatever kind of visualization works for you. I have a friend who right now in my community, a lot of us are moving through grief. And it's a beautiful experience to at least have community to do it together, although it's also very difficult. And one thing that we're doing is checking in on each other to make sure we're hydrated. We'll get to some body sensations a little bit later, but grieving is exhausting on your body, your brain, and your nervous system. And so you need a little extra something. A little extra sleep, a little extra water, a little extra snacks. Think about if you were to go back to toddler mode, you need a self-care like it is your full-time job. You need a self-care like it is your passion project. Giving yourself safe, soft places to land regularly. Seek out support. So we talked about shock, denial, temporary. All of these are intended to be temporary. Now, what's listed as the second, now again, this is not in chronological order, this just is numbered as number 2 as we get through it, is anger. Anger. Anger is an important emotion because I find, at least for myself, that always what's under anger is hurt or pain. And if I'm feeling disempowered or victimized by hurt or pain, it feels a lot more empowering and activating to feel anger. It might be easier to bring up the hurt and pain, to package it in anger, to express it, release it, and get it out of the system. So this is a coping mechanism that many people fall into, and it's natural, it's appropriate. It's very common to feel angry at the world, angry at creator universe, angry at the circumstances, angry at the person. This is really natural, and just hold space, if this feels appropriate, for the fact that more likely than not, more often than not, under the anger is usually hurt and pain. It's really hard to feel powerless. It's really hard to feel like a victim or without hope. It's a much more activating sensation and emotion to let that bubble into anger, frustration, rage that can be expressed. So if you feel like you need to express some rage, this is a great time to find a physical something, right? That doesn't harm yourself or others. Now that could be taking a really aggressive walk. I found myself weeding the heck out of a community garden. I got a lot of weeding done, man. But I needed a physical something to just get emotion out. There was a myriad of emotions, but one of them was a tinge of anger. Now, I know some folks can feel swallowed by their anger, and I think if that's there, let yourself also, I think anger can feel more comfortable than the abyss of loss and despair. So if the anger is what wants to come out, just give it an outlet. It's punching a pillow, it's screaming into a pillow, it's putting on an angry song and just like sob screaming it out. It's writing a letter that's just full of your rage, right? It's natural and normal to feel this way. And again, also important to acknowledge that there may be other feelings that are really uncomfortable. If anger is uncomfortable for you, maybe you dip down into those other feelings to express them. That's underneath anger. If anger is really comfortable for you, express that in a healthy way, and then see if there's anything underneath that might also want to be expressed. So anger, we kind of talked about how it can be related to that feeling of victimhood, powerlessness. It's so frustrating when you didn't want this to happen. You wouldn't have elected for this to have happened, at least not in this way. So if you start to sense those overwhelming feelings of anger, I highly suggest you find a healthy way to give yourself an outlet, because you don't want to carry any of these things in your system for too long. That's how chronic disease is built. That's how chronic trauma starts living in your brain and your body, right? So it's okay to feel them, but we have to feel it to heal it. So we talked about denial. We attached kind of shock onto that. We talked about anger, and we talked about what might be under that anger. Next, again, in order of simply categorizing this, but not necessarily in chronological order of what you might be experiencing, is bargaining. The phrase bargaining doesn't always resonate with everyone, but I think about it as the what ifs. Some people phrase it as the if onlys. So it's the, if only I could have prevented this from happening. What if I had just called them or stopped this? Or what if I'd been there? Or what if I could have, what if years ago we would have changed these or that plans? It's the trying to make sense. I think of bargaining as like trying to make sense of it. And I think sometimes there may be guilt associated with bargaining. So it's the idea that like, maybe I could have changed this. Maybe I'm at fault somehow, right? Because it might feel more empowering to think that maybe there was something you could have done about it. Now, it's an appropriate response to spend time in the what ifs. We just don't want to get into the obsessive spiraling of what ifs. If this is what your grieving becomes full time, that's when it can get dangerous. Now, this is a great opportunity to talk to a friend, someone on the outside who can clock you and say, I hear that you're feeling some feelings of regret. Have you ever thought about XYZ? The fact that this was what have you. So bargaining is a place to be that is very appropriate in the grieving process. It often includes feelings of guilt, feelings of if only or what if. It's okay to be there, and we can cycle in and out of it. Great place to have a therapist to talk with, to be in a group circle of grievers, like group grieving circles you can find via, and they have different kinds of names, but you can find them online, you can find them locally. A lot of them are free. And it's just a place to go and be sad. Give yourself permission to be angry, be frustrated, be feeling the feelings wherever you are on that spectrum, on that. I think of it almost like a pie. If these are all the sensations that may or may not be included in grief, and we can kind of like overlap portions of it, right? As opposed to simply a spectrum. Now, it might be a spectrum and you might be somewhere on it, but it's almost, I really love to use this idea, but it's like a stovetop where there are these different kinds of feelings and different variations of them may be turned up to different degrees. So bargaining, what ifs, if only, a natural, normal place to be. We can dip our toe, spend some time there, really feel those feelings. If you catch yourself always doing the what ifs or feeling like you're in an obsessive spiral, start to give yourself permission. Either write them out and then write a counter. Be the advocate on the other side. Be the one who helps to balance, right? Back and forth. Find a person who can be that on the outside. A friend who is trusted, a trauma specialist, a therapist, or in a group grieving scenario. This is really helpful. Because sometimes we need someone on the outside to clock our thinking patterns. We may have normalized something that's really negative self-talk, that's really self-blaming and self-punishing. And you don't have to go there, and you don't have to be there long. I mean, you can notice that you're feeling these feelings, know that it's very common, and then if you start to feel trapped, get yourself a little life preserver. Ask for someone to throw you something from the ship, right? So you're not just out there in the waves by yourself. Now, number 4 is depression. Gosh, depression's so heavy. Depression is like a heavy, heavy blanket where you might just want to stay in bed and not move a muscle. And I think it's really important. If you've never seen body scans of people with different emotions or brain scans of someone who has depression or is in a depressed state or out of a depressed state, I highly suggest you take a moment, Google it. Parts of your brain go offline. Offline. This means that simple tasks, where you had like synapses that would just kind of snap and get you from one thought to the next, they're not available anymore. It's like your brain Google Maps is down. You know that you want to be somewhere and it's somewhere on that mountain over there. And you know that there are some road closures, but you don't know how to get there. You don't have a route. So it's going to take a little extra time and energy to reroute and find your way to where you want to go when you are accustomed to traveling with Google Maps that will give you the route and will tell you if and when there are road closures. Google Maps is down and there are road closures and you're not quite sure how to get there, but you're going to stumble and try to find your way. Of course you're going to be exhausted. That's a lot of extra effort. Oh my gosh, it's like taking a machete to the jungle. We can't just go down the well-trodden paths, right, of our neuro pathways. Things are offline. Entire categories and sections of our brain might feel offline. You might lose interest and pleasure in things that you used to really enjoy for a period of time. You might require a lot of extra water. Thank you to my friend who checks in on us for hydration. You might require extra food sustenance, energy. You might require a lot of extra rest. When I'm feeling depressed, I just want to sleep. My nervous system says, we're done. No more. You don't have energy for this, that, and the third. I might push myself through one of them, and then I start to feel how I'm running on steam. And by the time I get to the second, I realize I don't have energy for the third thing. When I'm not in a depressed state, perhaps I would have had energy for all three. But it's important to give yourself permission to take time to rest. If you're going and you're pushing the grief down because it's uncomfortable, that's a very natural response. I have been guilty of doing that in the past, many a time, and not even realizing that I was avoiding feeling the feelings. I thought I had felt all the feelings I needed to feel, had not. At some point, if you do this, if you make a habit out of it, the body keeps the score. It's a great book to read about trauma and the impact it has on the brain and body. The body keeps the score. Your body will carry this trauma for you, but at some point when your systems get overrun and overwhelmed, things will start to also go offline or get shut down. So being in a depressed state, especially after loss, is very appropriate. It's very natural. Allow yourself to be in that hibernation, wintering mode, knowing that there will be another spring. And at some point in time, enjoying the spring does not mean that you forgot about the bleakness of winter, but it's giving yourself permission to hold space for these polarizing circumstances. So, honestly, please look at those scans because I think it will help you understand why you're so freaking tired. And or if you have a friend who, when they're depressed, they just don't want to go anywhere, they don't want to do anything, how do you make it easy for them? How do you bring them food? How do you send them food if they don't have social spoons? Or show up and say, we don't have to talk. I'm going to sit and read. You can put on whatever you want on Netflix. I just want to be here with you, if they're open to that. Finding a way to allow people, without shaming them, to be in what that depression looks like. Now, again, like with all of these stages, there is a moment when you realize you've overstayed your welcome. You've kind of, you've stayed through that intended window of time. And it's time to transition into the next something. But needing to feel it to heal it is really hard when there's the heaviness of depression. But it's so important for us to have the conversation that it is appropriate. It's okay to feel depressed. And finding people you can talk about it with is so important so that you don't get swallowed by it. Because you are not alone. There are so many people that battle with mental health or anxiety, depression. And this is different from clinical depression. This is different from Circumstantial depression is different from clinical, but if you also suffer from clinical depression, you need even more soft spaces to land. You need even more self-care tactics and techniques. You need even more, right? Give yourself that gift. Again, a reminder, this is a great opportunity if you're really feeling depressed. Therapy. You can find therapy online now. Most of them are covered by most insurances that you can still get through via the healthcare marketplace or something that you have online. And if you don't have that, please find a trusted friend or find a group on Facebook or online. Give yourself permission to see that other people are grieving too. So we've talked about denial. We added shock on there. We talked about anger and we added how, that victim feeling, powerlessness, and hurt, pain, despair is often under that. We discussed bargaining, which is really like the what ifs, the if onlys. And we just talked about depression and that it's natural to move through this slowing down, this feeling heavy. This is when you're really processing. And one way that I like to think about it before we move on from depression, and I associate this with depression, but also just with nervous system overwhelm. I have noticed for myself that sometimes I can clock when I'm in nervous system overwhelm because a small something causes feelings of overwhelm. And I know it's not about this small something. So I think about my nervous system drain being clogged. And all these little things have been dripping on top. And now the sink basin is full and one little tiny drip at the top can cause overflow. So if one little tiny drip is triggering you to feel exhausted, overwhelmed, or to feel feelings of like anger, frustration, deep pain, whatever is coming up for you, it's really useful to clock, this little drippy drip caused a little bit of a flooding. Maybe I'm clogged. Maybe my nervous system's overwhelmed, my brain is overwhelmed, right? My emotional heart center is overwhelmed. And how do I unclog it? I'm going to need some safe spaces to land. I'm going to need to really self-care so that I feel comfortable enough to let my subconscious mind send up through the subtle body and up to the conscious mind the feelings that we need to feel to heal. So sometimes if you start to feel like a little drippy drip is causing a whole flood, it might be time to remove some triggers. Find, if you do any kind of isolation, ensure that you still have connection. Sometimes that's when we go into isolation mode of I just need to kind of hibernate. Just make sure that there's a difference from giving yourself grace to be on your own and in your solitude, honoring that solitude can be really helpful, and fully isolating yourself from others. So ensure if you start to feel like, gosh, these little drippy drips are causing a whole flood, maybe my nervous system, my brain, my body, my emotions, my heart center, maybe something's clogged. How can I get down through the feelings to unclog the drain so that everything can flow out? It's a great opportunity to mention that crying, sobbing, wailing, this is transmutation of energy. If we're going to look at the energetic side of things, crying is really important. If you're feeling numb and you're not going to cry right now, that's okay. Don't feel like you have to. But if you sense that you're pushing back down, resisting, find a safe space. It could be your car, it could be a bathroom stall, it could be at home in your bedroom, to let some of it out so that you don't get that clogged drain, and even just a little drippy drip causes a whole flood, right? We get it. All right, now let's move on to, this is number 5. So in the Kubler-Ross system, this is like these are general categories. So they weren't by any means saying that this was the end or all encompassing, but this was like a general suggestion. And I think this one's really interesting to kind of look at, and then we're going to add a couple useful follow-ups. Next is acceptance. And acceptance, I think it's really important to look at acceptance, and it doesn't mean that like everything is okay and we have returned to whatever our idea of normal before was, it means that we have accepted that this old era, the way that things were, has come to a close, and we're allowing ourselves to rebuild or exist in or be open to discovering what that new normal looks and feels like. This can take a really long time to get to. And also, sometimes we find ourselves in acceptance, and then again, we might cycle through or recycle one of these other categories. When I'm thinking of acceptance, for me, it's like learning to live with grief. It's accepting that this is now a part of our existence, that carrying grief forward moving forward in my life doesn't mean that I'm leaving this person, this situation, this circumstance behind completely. I'm going to carry it with me. I'm also giving myself permission to craft, define, discover what will eventually become a new normal. And that includes the absence of whatever was lost. This is so tricky to navigate because, look, I think we came to Earth because one of the incredible gifts of being human, and it is also one of the most difficult parts, is that we are capable of holding extreme emotions, really powerful emotions, like joy and ecstasy, deep depression and despair. And the existence of polarity, one in this universe, but particularly in the Earth experience, and this whole human experience, is that we are allowed to feel opposing things at the same time. You can begin to feel happiness or gratitude or joy again, and it doesn't mean that you don't also feel sorrow or grief or despair for this other thing. So I think of acceptance as learning to move forward, knowing that grief is a part of our experience, and we may be continuously dipping our toe into these various categories through time. The goal is that as you're moving forward and you're finding these different waves and things, that you're giving yourself permission to also enjoy. It's not replace what was lost, cannot be replaced. But you're giving yourself permission to carry forward through that grieving process into whatever becomes your new reality. I like new reality a lot better than new normal. Normal as a general phrase is always odd to me because we all have different ideas of what normal is. I think new reality is a really nice way to say that. We started with shock and denial. We moved through anger, and we thought about sometimes there's even pain and guilt under anger, that we might also be angry with ourselves. Or society, or what have you. There's so many things. Bargaining is the what ifs. What if I had only, or I only, if only I had. Depression is really giving ourselves permission to feel the feels, and it's heavy and it's hard, and it's okay if you seek help. It's okay if you require medication. It's okay if you benefit from a support group. I highly suggest that you find the recipe that works for who you are as a whole human person. Next is acceptance, or I like to think of learning to live life on the other side of having experienced the loss. Accepting that grief is a part of the new reality and giving ourselves permission to move through that new reality, to navigate, right? And move forward. Now, again, if we're thinking of these downward dips as we're spiraling upward, we know that there will be these moments when we feel like we've got it figured out, and then a big life event occurs and we realize that they would have been there, and it just hurts. Or we see something that makes us laugh and think of them and we want to share it. Or an anniversary comes up and we weren't prepared for it. Or maybe we were, but it still hurts. Now, I don't know what your beliefs include. I personally have, throughout time, come to believe that I can still talk to my deceased friends and loved ones, and I find that really helpful for me is to connect with them here, connect with them here, connect with them here. That doesn't work for everyone, and that's okay. So talking to a friend might be helpful. But if you think talking to or concerning a situation that you may be grieving through would be helpful for you, you can do this in your car, when you're driving somewhere. You can do this when you're out on a walk for yourself. You can do this when you're in the bathroom, you know, when you're in your bedroom. Just make sure you're giving yourself permission to honor the beauty of the relationship that was, or the beauty of the gift that was, or the beauty of the person that was. And I want to acknowledge that some people are grieving having lost and never rebuilt. Sometimes you've had a tough relationship with someone and you're grieving the fact that you never got to come into alignment or feel like everything was resolved. I will say that from my personal spiritual perspective, I believe that folks on the other side, they have a bird's eye view now. They're not in the maze. They're over top looking down at the maze. So they have a much better understanding of the choices they made and the choices that we've made. I don't know if that's helpful for anyone, but I just want to put that out there. Now, we've talked a little bit about the Kubler-Ross 5 stages of grief, but there is a book titled The Sixth Stage of Grief that was written with Kubler-Ross by David Kessler, who's a trauma specialist, and he's got really great videos if you're looking to kind of help talk you through grief. YouTube's a great resource. There's lots of videos on grieving. And he added the 6th stage of grief, and this is really an alignment for my belief system. The sixth stage of grief is considered to be finding meaning. Finding meaning. What I like about this is it's not the idea that like everything's perfect and we move on and our life is flawless, you know, on the other side of this acceptance. It's the idea that when we accept that it happened and that we look back, the acknowledgement that we are the narrators of this tale. We are co-creators in the universe, and we get to assign meaning. We can assign a victimhood meaning, or we can assign a more empowering meaning. Both are completely valid, and your meaning might be very different from someone else's meaning on a loss. One of the exercises that he does, and absolutely look this up and put yourself through it, but I will walk you through a little taste of it. One of the exercises that he walks folks through, which I really enjoy, and again, this is very similar to something that I walk many of my students through, is the idea of, without any judgment, listing 3 life occurrences, 3 major life occurrences, right? I lost my father at the age of 11. I got to study in New York and London. I met the love of my life. Okay? Now, I can assign meaning to each of these things. And he has you walk back through and say, what is the worst thing about each of those things? What's the worst thing? Right? I experienced great loss and trauma at a very young age. That was the worst thing. I wasn't able to stay as long as I wanted to. And it forced me to reckon with who I had been and that I had not been who I truly am for a very long time until I came into alignment with my partner. Then he has you look back on these 3 occurrences and list the 3 best things, the 3 most wonderful things that came out. One thing that happened, the best thing that happened with each one of these 3 things. So I learned resilience and felt very comfortable discussing grief and loss of life at a very young age. I followed my passions and felt in alignment. I accepted that I was intrinsically drawn to someone that I feel I was destined to overlap with. Okay? And throughout this process, and please do this on your own, walk yourself through 3 major life occurrences. And these can all be bad, if you like for them to be. First time through, neutrally express what occurred without any emotional anything. This happened, this happened, this happened. Second time through, list the worst thing that happened out of each of those circumstances. Third time through, list the best thing that happened out of each of those circumstances. On the other side of this, when he asks folks, why do you think we did this exercise? They'll kind of share a perspective, or they'll say, it's helpful to find the light at the end of the tunnel, or, the silver lining, or there's always something positive or good to take away even from the darkest of places, whatever their answer might be. And then he shares with them, yes, all that is true, and you are the narrator of this tale and how it's impacted you. You get to choose how you frame this. And I want to add to that, we're allowed to carry the polarity of light and dark at the same time. Humans are adept at holding really intense emotions, and emotions that are very different from one another, right? And so, as co-creators in the universe, we can feel empowered to say, although this awful thing happened that I wouldn't have chosen, this is what I learned. This is what I gained. This is what came as a result. In this moment, I'm looking out the window and I'm seeing a butterfly. And recently, with the loss of a friend, every time I've had a moment where I'm engaging with something having to do with him or his loss or his energy, I have been seeing them everywhere. And this is very significant for me because butterfly is one of my animal totems, and it's really a sign of transformation. And if grief isn't a transformation and transmutation of our emotions and our feelings and our states from one place to another, gosh, I don't know what is. But I think about the transformation that he went through physically, energetically. And I think about the transformation that our community has gone through. And I'm going to let these emotions be here because they're real and true. And although I wouldn't have chosen this heavy thing that happened that I'm moving through in this moment, if I was looking for a light, if I was looking for the best thing that happened as a result, there are a lot of really good things. And that includes community coming together and having a shared experience and having an opportunity to support one another. And if that's not a gift, I don't know what is. It includes my friend behaving in alignment with his character, doing something that is so him, that was so true to form. And beyond that, on the other side, being a help to save even more lives through his organ donation. Whew. So although I did not expect that, and I didn't plan for this, if we're here to normalize grief and we're here to have these conversations about it, then I can give myself permission to be in the feels too. And I hope that that helps to give you permission to be in the feels wherever you are on your journey. Now, again, I'm in no way an expert, but I have grieved, sadly, the loss of many people, quite a few friends, many family members, and of course the ends of eras, the ends of relationships and work, pets, all of these things that shape the lives that we live. So if at the end of this, I hope to leave you with anything, it's the idea that you're not alone. Grieving is natural. We need to give ourselves permission to grieve, no matter what society feels like for you, or how you've been programmed as an individual, or how we've been programmed as a community. One thing that I witnessed recently was really this community grieving and how helpful it is to experience in practice that you're not alone. I'd love for you to have not the experience of grieving, but the experience of connection and or community in whatever way would be helpful for you. So, before we leave, after we've reviewed these 5 stages of grief, with this 6th stage of grief, shock denial. Denial is really the word that's used, but shock's often added onto there. Anger, which I think can also come with personal anger at the self, anger at society, anger at the situation. Underneath that might be victimhood, powerlessness, and feelings of hurt. Bargaining, the what ifs, the if onlys. Depression, which is heavy. And it's okay to rest, to care for yourself, and to ask for help. Lean in to a support system. People want to show up for you. Acceptance, I think that's the idea of allowing yourself to move forward, even if that means carrying the grief with you, to build or be open to the new reality. Then we have the 6th stage of grief, which is finding meaning. I like to say assigning meaning, right? Creating meaning. What is something positive that you can take forward, a lesson that you learned that has changed you? We are never the same on the other side of grief. It is so deeply impactful. And it means that we're open enough to be impacted by life and relationships and love and circumstance and overwhelm. Even if it's the end of a friendship that was awful and you finally release yourself from it, doesn't mean you're not going to grieve the end of that friendship. And you're allowed to grieve it. They also have the 10-step grieving process by Brooke Dean, PhD, and others. I'm going to add on there, they mentioned shock. Facing emotions is a part of it. Feeling the feels, feel it to heal it. We already discussed depression. They added physical symptoms. Now, I think this is important. We discussed your brain. Parts of your brain are offline. Your heart behaves differently. Your digestion changes when you're grieving. Making sure that you're eating enough and that you're eating some balance between comfort food, which is really helpful, and health-focused food as well, which can be very rebalancing. Make sure you're getting nourishment. So physical symptoms could also mean anxiety. We talked about that kind of drain being clogged, right? That sense of overwhelm. That can bring up and manifest itself as physical symptoms. Know that your body keeps the score, might store it for you until you're ready to process it. If you need help, that's a great time to get external assistance, like a therapist, etc., or a trauma specialist, to feel it, to heal it, feel through it so you can release and transmute it, right? Transmute it and release it. Otherwise, those physical symptoms, that dis-ease can become disease. Panic. I like that they added panic on there. To me, that's the feelings of overwhelm. Or it could be panic at the loss, like you just want to feel like you can fix it. Guilt, I think that's really, we've kind of related that to our bargaining or our anger, but I like that it is on its own in this list. You might just be overwhelmed with feelings of guilt and that it's very natural response. They have anger on here. We discussed anger. They have resistance, which really I think of resistance very much as that kind of shock and denial. And the fear of feeling the feelings, I think we can be resistant to that, especially if we're not well practiced in it. If we've really worked very hard to pack things down for a long time, as I had done, it was a survival mechanism. It served me very well for a long time, and then it didn't. And unlearning that was a process. And I will tell you, I benefited from therapy. I benefited at that time from medication. I benefited from removing triggers. And I benefited from a lot of internal work. But it was all really helpful and healing. Next is hope. So finding that idea that life can go on. It doesn't mean that it'll be the same. It'll never be the same. It can never be the same. But that you can still, in that world of polarity, right? This grief is allowed to come with me, and I'm also allowed to feel feelings of joy. Sometimes that's where guilt comes up for folks, is the feeling of like, I feel like I'm not honoring the grief, the loss of this person, if I start to do joyful things. Like I feel like I'm turning on them. I'm letting them down. I'm not honoring them, right? Even if we know that that person would say, no, go live your life, be joyful, right? Sometimes we can carry guilt for finding something that is not a replacement, but that finding something that fills the space, even if it's different, right? Fills a portion, a small segment of the space that is left, this gaping hole of the loss. So if you're feeling those feelings of guilt come up, again, a therapist can help you talk through that and help to identify when the negative self-talk is getting a little too out of control. But I like that they have that guilt on here separately. We talked about resistance, we talked about hope, and then acceptance is their number 10, acceptance, which is coming to that place of, okay, I can move forward with my life, even if I carry the grief with me. Look, I feel like we're pretty complete here. I really highly suggest that if you're moving through grief, that you find a support system that works for you. There's no shame in figuring out what that recipe might be. If it includes therapy, group counseling, if it includes medication, if it includes finding a group of friends. I'm very fortunate that I am a part of an active community that reaches out to one another and practices giving each other space to feel the feelings that we need to feel, whatever that might look or feel like. You're not alone. Grief is a natural process. It's really hard. If you were caring for a friend moving through grief, what's some advice that you would give them? Would it include resting? Would it include finding a balance between doing all the things and staying home all the time? What does that balance look like? Making sure you're resting, but maybe getting some time connecting as well. Would it look like getting enough hydration and finding a balance between comfort food and nourishment? Would it be feeling the feels and finding an outlet that's appropriate for you? Sometimes we have to watch a sad movie to give ourselves permission, or we need to be completely alone because we feel shame or discomfort feeling our feelings in front of others. If that's true for you, figure out what that outlet might want to look like or feel like. Journaling, listening to sad music, crying it all out, right? Ensure that you're giving yourself permission. If you're feeling brain fog, if you're feeling body aches, our bodies are often in pain when we're grieving because of what it puts our systems through. Again, parts of your brain are offline. So something as simple as navigating a neural pathway suddenly becomes a very long road trip that takes maybe more than twice as long and requires extra energy because it's not a direct path. It might be up and around the mountain to get to where you're going. Know that it's okay to get external support. If you don't feel like you have someone safe to talk to, find a safe person. It could be a professional. That is a very healthy place to talk through wherever you are in the grieving process. I love you so much. I hope that you are giving yourself permission wherever you are in your process, or wherever you might be in the future, or wherever you are in terms of supporting a friend, that you leave here with at least one permission slip that you may have needed. One permission slip, whether that's to feel the shock, the denial, the numbness, and to not guilt yourself, to feel the anger and to know that that might feel more empowering for a moment, to honor the what ifs and the if onlys without living there for too long, maybe find someone to check you, to feel that depression can be full of depth and heaviness, that we don't have to live there forever, that it's natural, it's appropriate to feel those heavy feelings, setting yourself up to have some soft landings, especially if you start to move into the depression portion. Acceptance. Look, you might not be there for a while, and that's okay. Knowing that there are stages sometimes is helpful, just to know that there's going to be another step and another, and that there's something on the other side, something lighter. That doesn't mean that the grieving ever completely leaves us, but you will have these breaks and these breaths before another wave might hit. And that as you're moving up, these kind of movements down become less overwhelming over time. Typically, you might every once in a while on an anniversary or at a big life event where it is particularly meaningful for them to have not been there, or for you to realize that this big change has come into practice, for you to really feel it. And then assigning meaning, finding meaning, creating meaning. Although you wouldn't have chosen this, what is a more empowering, uplifting, helpful lesson, takeaway, gift that you can carry with you to help balance out the weight of grief? So that you're not, walking this way. We can be a whole balanced human. We can hold space for polarity. We're allowed to rediscover joy, and it does not mean that we need to feel guilt or shame, as long as we're also feeling those feelings of grief, right? We've got to give ourselves permission to feel both. You might also need to give yourself permission to feel joy when it feels appropriate for it to come back up for you. All right, enough of that. We went through all the stages. We know that our body, our minds, our systems are going through something very different. We're giving ourselves permission. You got to see me feeling some of my feels as well. Now, when I'm alone, it's going to be a lot more intense than that. Just a little taste. All right. I love you. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you for sharing time, space, and energy with me here today. And I will see you around. Bye.